getting things and getting away with it. So that's a little element thrown in there. The driving need of the self-preservation 8 is an exaggerated ability to take care of oneself and one's needs. You could say the need is like an exaggerated selfishness. Self-preservation 8s are people who know how to do business. They know how to barter and bargain and get the upper hand over anybody. And they think they really have the art of the deal down. The self-preservation 8s are characters who know how to survive in the most difficult situations and how to get what they want from other people. They disqualify any feeling, person, idea, or institution that opposes their desires. They go against whatever and seek revenge without knowing why. The other two subtypes have a reason. They know exactly why. It's got to do with 30 years ago when you stood on my toe. This subtype doesn't care. They just have a vague feeling about wanting to get vengeance. They're not really worried about what the cause was. They're just going to do it. Self-preservation 8 is the most armed and protected of all the 8s. They devalue the world of feelings. And they can be confused with the one type that is the one-to-one subtype. And I have to admit, I think I am a one-to-one subtype of one, but so that I can have those moments when revenge comes up. You know, it's so that I can identify with that. In working on themselves, they move toward the virtue of innocence through learning to allow for a wide range of feelings, especially vulnerable feelings, and expressing more thoughts and emotions, especially in relationship. It helps for them to try to meet the challenge of consciously developing trust and depending more on others for the fulfillment of their needs. So again, a balancing out of all of these energies that, you know, I can have a family, I can have friends, and they can actually provide some of the needs that I'm after. Then we have the social subtype. Solidarity is more the word that would describe them. The social 8 is the counter type of the 8 subtypes. And we talked about this especially with the 6, that there's sometimes a counter type. So the subtype for the 8 is the counter type. Social 8s represent a contradiction. The 8 is a rebellious person who often goes against social norms. So there is that kind of like the revolutionary, you know, Bernie Sanders. Socialism, because capitalism doesn't work. But the social 8 is also oriented toward protection and loyalty. This is a social, antisocial person. They express lust and aggression in service of life and of other people. In contrast to the self-preservation 8, the social 8 is more loyal and less aggressive. A social 8 is a helpful 8, one who is concerned with the injustice that happens to others. And yet there is also an antisocial element to this character with regard to the rules of society. I have a feeling actually that my friend, the social worker, this is her type, kind of describes her. Symbolically, this character represents the child who became tough in protecting his mother against his father. So people who grew up in abusive homes where the father was abusive towards the mother can have this, you know, like you're your mother's defender and savior, and then it just goes from there to a whole approach to life. This is someone who bends together with the mother and goes against the patriarchal power and all that is associated with it. It is a violence out of solidarity. I think violence is a strong word there, but while this 8 subtype develops a strong ability to care for and protect others, with regard to himself or herself, there is an unconscious giving up of the need for love of the inner child and a compensatory movement towards power and pleasure. They like the power the group offers and can, in extreme, tend towards megalomania. Social 8s are very sensitive to detecting situations in which some people are being persecuted are exploited by others that hold more power. And when they detect this kind of thing, they tend to act like those who are less powerful. It says, Karl Marx was likely a social 8. They engaged in constant action. Action is where they lose themselves. Overall, this 8 appears more mellow and friendly and less quick to anger than the other 8s. They tend to rebel in more subtle, less obvious ways. Social 8s can look like 9s or 2s because they can be very relationship-oriented and less obviously aggressive than other 8s. But they can be distinguished from these other types in that they are still quite assertive and rebellious. In working on themselves, these 8s can move towards innocence through learning how to be more consciously aware of and protective of their inner child. They grow through developing as much care toward their own young self as they show to others. It also helps them to evolve if they can allow themselves to open up to receiving more love and care from other people. I was just thinking there of was it Robert Bradshaw, and remember all the inner child work that came out? John Bradshaw. John Bradshaw, yeah. I don't know, I'm just wondering if he was an 8, because I think that's where his interest in all of that came from, was his own childhood. Dennis?
What does a psychiatric disorder do in terms of the personality type? Does it make them more of that type of personality, or can they completely hide it?
Well, so think of them. Dennis asked, how does a mental disorder affect the type that you are? So if you think of a mental disorder as the mind is not functioning the way it should, it's like there's a crack in the glass. And so whenever it hits the crack, then it gets distorted. So it's like a lens or a prism, that if you are, take the example of the 8, if you're that sort of arrogant, power-driven, insensitive to others, if that's, if that's your basic approach to life, well then if you have some kind of mental disorder or organic disorder on top of that, it's going to amplify that and exaggerate it. So, yeah, it just makes it worse.
It depends which disorder you have.
Yeah.
Not every disorder is going to amplify the 8 qualities. I mean, it depends
No,
what
I'm
you have,
saying well,
right?
yeah.
If you have antisocial personality disorder, yes. If you have major depressive disorder recurrent, no. It won't amplify your 8.
Right, but it's not going to help it. It's not going to
No, it won't help.
modify it. Yeah.
It seems to me if you have a sense of what the childhood wound was, it gives you enormous information about why this person
Right.
is responding the way they are, and it gives you more compassion.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's, whether it's the Enneagram or anything else, the more that we can walk in someone's shoes and understand where they came from and what their early childhood experience was, the nurture or lack of, then, as you said, we can understand the person and we can be more compassionate.
I just have a quick question. Do you think 8s are more prone to addiction? I'm talking serious drug addiction and so forth.
Not necessarily. I mean, some of the we've gone through 8 of the numbers now, and some of the other numbers seem to be more prone. We talked about the 7s last week, can have an issue with addiction. So can 4s. So anybody can be an addict, I think, but I think there are some of the types that seem to be more prone. 9s also, because again, they kind of stuff their feelings, they can drink, use drugs, sedate, dissociate or not be present. to pain or whatever. So we're kind of running out of time here. So let me do the third subtype, and then we can open it up for more questions or comments. So the third subtype is the 1-to-1 subtype, and the word that they use here is possession. 1-to-1/8 have strong antisocial tendency. People with this subtype are provocative people who express lust through rebellion and openly saying that their values differ from the norm. The 1-to-1/8 is the most rebellious of the 8 subtypes, and interesting, also the most emotional. In this 8, there is a detachment of the intellect. There is a lot of acting and passion, but not as much thinking. The 8 is more outspoken with their rebellion. They like to be seen as bad, or they don't mind being seen as bad. They don't respect rules and laws. It's almost a matter of pride to go against the stream of convention. The name given to the 1-to-1/8 is possession. This 8 displays the idea of possession in that he or she takes over the whole scene energetically, becoming the center of things. 1-to-1/8s like to feel their power through grabbing everyone's attention. They don't seek material security, but seek to get power over things. They want to be the one in charge. Naranjo, who was one of the people that developed the modern-day Enneagram, notes that he originally thought possession meant possessing one's partner, but later came to see that it means something larger and more all-encompassing than this, a kind of energetic, charismatic taking over or dominance of the whole environment. They have the idea that the world begins to run when they arrive. 1-to-1/8s can be fascinating and charismatic, and their power comes through a kind of seductiveness and intensity that differentiates them stylistically from the other 2 8 subtypes. These 8s have more colors in their feathers. They are more magnetic and more outspoken. As the most emotional of the 8s, the 1-to-1 subtype displays a great deal of passion for things. And this passion may at times get expressed through expressions of emotions and vulnerability that may seem surprising to others and atypical of many 8s. This 8 probably won't get mistaken for any other type very often, being a fairly 8-ish 8, but it can resemble a 1-to-1/4 in its intensity and ability to express anger. So we talked about, in terms of the 4 personality, the 1-to-1/4 can be really angry and very, again, that outward expression, so that they can be mistaken for being an 8. They're actually not. In working on themselves, these 8s can move towards innocence through exploring and sharing their emotions more consciously as a way to own their own vulnerability. It also helps them to observe and explore their need to rebel, to see what underlying need this may be expressing, and to manage their energy such that they can share the space with others. They can also benefit from thinking things through more, not just feeling and acting. Do we have an 8 who might be willing to just share some stuff with us?
Okay. Well, the vengeance,
It's on.
the vengeance part came right up when you said, how's that?
There you go.
The vengeance part came up when you asked, did anybody work for an 8? Because you didn't ask, are there any 8s who were bosses? And so I'm like, I was stuck there for a few minutes.
So say more about that.
Well, as a manager for 20 years in public health, environmental health with Health and Human Services, the justice part, okay, I need to protect groundwater, public health and safety. My employees, I believe, had a very clear understanding of what their expectations, my expectations of them were. And yes, about 10% needed to go. They couldn't or wouldn't do the job. And then one of those things I was just reflecting on when reading these is that I'm not sure it was my way or the highway, but I always won or got my way. And that was surprising to people. They say, well, we're going into this meeting with this big developer or this big issue and they want to do this. I'm like, well, that's going to cause pollution, or that site's already polluted, it needs to be cleaned up. And we come out of the meeting, and my staff people turn to me and say, how did you do that? You won, and they thanked you. I said, well, that's the trick. That's the rest of how to be more integrated, I think. Then just as an 8, I got to tell you, Jerry, I read the Enneagrams Made Simple. I went, ow, that's painful. Check, 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 check. Okay, read the app. Oh, shoot, check, 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 check. The Sacred Enneagram. Dang, damn it. I guess I'm an 8. and Julie being a 2, she has said that there is something faster than the speed of light, and that's my anger will go from 0 to 110% right now, and then I'll put it away just as fast. And she'll be laid out on the floor, shell-shocked for a day. So I count to 10 a lot. Just trying to
Right.
release and let it go, turns to let it go, and then don't. I'm just trying to relax. So.
And there's the perfect example again of how the relationship works, because the 8 goes to 2 for redemption.
Right.
So you're learning all of this wonderful stuff from Julie about how to balance yourself out.
Right,
Isn't it sad that she's not here this morning?
She's so
She
disappointed.
would've-
Yeah, we were talking last night about, the 2s go to the 8 when they're upset. And I have to, because I was like, oh, it's a challenge, but we're sparring. And it's like, oh. Just try not to. But yeah,
Yeah, because if she's going to an 8 and you're staying in your 8, then you have 2 8s going at it.
oh, right.
Yeah, so
Right.
that's not going to work.
I'll take it on.
So if she goes to the 8, you've got to find some way
Right.
to move
Right.
over to the...
It's amazing.
Well, thank you. And for those of you who know Curtis, he's the nicest guy. Like, he's not this megalomaniac, horrible person, but he's still an 8. So,
So I am a living example of the person who, that question between sexual 4 and sexual 8 has always been present. I test always as an 8, and my husband, mother, and best friend tell me I'm an 8. But I can relate to a lot of the 4. The reason I took the microphone today is I want to talk about how a lot of what we're hearing is unhealthy, average to unhealthy 8. But there are instances where, I'll just tell personal experience. So many years ago, I was the chief resident in psychiatry at Stanford. And I didn't ask to be that. I actually got phone calls that said, Linda, we need you to be the chief resident because, the other residents, they said, we don't trust the people who are like vying for the job. So I said, okay, and I became the chief resident. And about halfway through the year, the person who was my supervisor pulled me aside and said, Linda, you're intimidating the interns. They're all afraid of you, and they won't tell you what they need. And I was flabbergasted. Absolutely had no idea that this was the case. And because in my mind, all I was doing was protecting my interns. I was doing things like I didn't have to take call as chief resident. I didn't have to work 36-hour shift. I worked every holiday, 36-hour shift. So the interns didn't have to. So it's that the intention is to protect. And I will tell you this, and here's my best friend. If you're my friend, I will protect you to the death.
No matter how big.
Absolutely, guaranteed.
How many?
And then one more thing I want to tell, personal story, is this one I have to use some nasty language, so there you go.
Oh, good point.
We do that.
Oh, my God.
LBJ, notorious for,
Oh, yeah.
so
Okay, yeah.
they're salty in their language.
Okay, so this is about that we think we're bigger than we are. So I understand, like quantitatively, that I am a small person who doesn't weigh very much, but I don't feel that way energetically. So I ride like big horses and I, do all this sport stuff. Well, years ago, I was walking, with my handbag on my shoulder, I was walking down a street in the Tenderloin. I don't even know where I was, but it was a nasty neighborhood. And here comes this enormous, drunken man and blocks my way. He just stands in front of me and he's looking down at me from his, 6'2" height or whatever it is. And I was just walking, trying to get to a bus stop, and without a single thought in my head, I looked him in the eye and said, "Get the fuck out of my way." And he did. Right? As I continued walking down the street, then it's the afterthought. I was like, that might not have been really smart because I'm in the Tenderloin and I've got a handbag, And I thought, well, I'm just going to march. I'm not going to look back, and it was okay. So anyway, there's another side to the 8 that's the protective side. That's not always trying to hurt you or revenge on you.
Well, and that's where the social justice thing comes in. It is like trying to protect society, but trying to put up.
Thank you. I was just going to say it's like a chihuahua. A chihuahua and a German shepherd or a chihuahua and another large dog. They think they're big. Yeah. I'm a dog lover. Well, my first job out of college was I was working for a lawyer, and he was a terror, and he was a very unhealthy 8. And he had a closet, and inside the closet, he had a sign that said, "I don't get angry, I get even." And he wrote a book, and it was, I don't know how popular the book was, but he was supposedly popular for the book. He wrote a book called The Art of Negotiation. Right. And this guy
This reminds me of another story about another nun in Hawaii, and at the parish that I was at, and she had a bumper sticker on her car that says, "I don't get angry, I get even."
I wanted to talk about the issue of addiction because I come from a family full of addicts. Virtually every adult I grew up with was an addict. And so Noah did a thing on the brain. The brains of addicts and non-addicts are different. So like you're born to be an addict if circumstances trigger it, and other people couldn't be an addict if they tried. So my understanding is any number could be an addict. There's more to it than just that. That's how I'm assuming.
Right.
Yeah.
But having said that, like the 9s try to avoid difficulty, conflict,
Yeah.
and they tend to sort of use food and alcohol and things like that. The 7s, because of the enthusiasm, again, wanting to get away from the darker side of life, they can be addicts. The 4s, because they're prone to the depression and the sadness, they can get addicted as well.
It can be, but not everyone.
No, but not every 4 is, not every 8 is.
This is just a
yeah.
scientific thing that I
Right.
found very interesting. There's
Yeah.
and the 6s, quelling their anxiety.
I'll be quick. One more 8 thing is that I don't have addictive personality, but I was addicted to cigarettes when I was younger. And I want to tell you how I quit, and it's exactly in 8 way I got pissed off. Because those damn things were controlling me. They were. And every time I got an airplane, I wasn't allowed to smoke, and it really pissed me off. So the day I got on an airplane to go see a boyfriend, I said, "That's it, I'm never smoking again." And I never did.
Right, and it's all about control. You're not going to have anybody tell you.
Quiet 8.
See, we have 2 quiet 8s sitting in the front row,
9 wings.
and a 5 in the middle.
always detaching. So in terms of challenge, when I bought my property up here, I remember bringing my dad up here, and he was a 7, and he was large and in charge, and everything was. Anyway, and he saw the property that I bought, and the property I bought was, it was covered in weeds and broken down pieces of cars and trucks and refrigerators. I mean, it was, in Wyoming we used to call it a lay-down field. You just put your stuff down, lay it down, and you walk away. So he looked at me and he said, "You can't buy this. You're just one small girl." And I was like, "Are you serious?"
Said the wrong thing.
And I bought the property. And that was why I bought the property. 'Cause he was
Yeah, don't tell me
Don't
I
tell me I
can't
can't
do
do
it.
that.
All right, so this will be the last comment, and then we'll,
Well, I have 3 children and a girl and 2 sons. One son is a 4 and the other son is an 8. And it was exhausting because their emotional energy was so powerful. My son that was an 8 was a strong protector. He was always protecting the other kids on the playground that were getting bullied, but then he would be in trouble. So he was kind of a teacher's nightmare. And I was constantly trying to control him because his energy was so powerful and out there, and I was trying to protect him and control him. And so I could really, my question is though, I really saw from the time he entered the world, he had anger as a very dominant emotion. And he didn't come into an abusive home, he came into a very loving home, no discord between the parents. And so the whole question of nature and nurture is really interesting because he came in with this really strong anger that I could never understand. Perhaps it's a past life thing. But then his anger really promoted the kind of environment that developed an 8. So because he was I was trying to control him and protect him and all those things. So it's just a fascinating view of life and given me great insight into both of my sons. So thank you, Jerry.
well, and of course, Claire, it really was your fault, but...
Yeah.
No, but go back to what I keep saying every time that we talk about the environment. It was the perception.
Yes.
Right.
And you may have been wonderfully loving, and somehow, I mean, I'm not blaming you, but you know what I'm saying? It's like, it could be that he felt like this is too much,
Yeah.
and I need to push back.
Yeah.
And again, it's not that you did anything wrong. You were loving, you were
And
kind.
interestingly, out of the 3 adult children now, he is the most likely to look tenderly into my eyes and tell me he loves me. I just think that's amazing and wonderful.
Right.
Yeah.
That's a healthy age.
Yeah.
Yeah. So getting in touch with the vulnerability. Yeah. And so, you know, there's redemption here for all of us. There's integration, there's evolution, there's growth. Say what?
My retirement plan.
That's Consciousness' retirement plan is finally to find integration. Kathy Lee, did you say you want to take photographs of anybody?
I do.
Okay, so if you want to be in the extension to our directory, it was done about 1.5 years ago, Kathy Lee will see you over against this wall, being the enthusiast that she is.
Actually, see the list of names, usually you show us a list.
Oh, sorry, yes, I didn't do that. Sorry.
Not the book I have.
I know, there's so
the
much.
characters.
The characters. Okay, here we go. Let me go back to examples. Celebrities: Elaine Stritch, Charles Barkley, Denzel Washington, Queen Latifah, Rosie O'Donnell. Right, but Queen Latifah also like that really strong, you know, you're not going to mess with her. Sean Penn, like Justice going to Haiti, Frank Sinatra, that edgy. I don't get Julia Louis-Dreyfus at all. I don't get that sense of an age, but whatever. I don't really know. Oh, Tony Soprano, of course. So the mafia would be a personality. So Sophia Petrillo of the Golden Girls. That was the mother, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Let's see. Black Panther. Okay. All right. Barbara Walters. Martin Luther King Jr. Muhammad Ali.
Okay.
Wow, I would not have thought that. Nor the Seven Ring. Napoleon Bonaparte, Golda Meir, Ernest Hemingway, the Mafia. And you know, I think Golda Meir was like one of the first female world leaders. So again, you can just imagine if you wanted to become president, premier back in the 50s, you had to be strong because, as you all know, ladies, you have to do it better and twice as much as the man to get in the position. All right, thank you all for your participation. See you next week.